Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we're doing another listener question show, and I just took a peek at what the first question is, and it's like, oh boy, this is going to be a spicy way to start the show. So do we just want to dive right into it?
Do it.
All right. So the first question is from at Dr. Patty Jones, and I think Patty is going to take Ferdy Pacheco's old nickname. She's going to be the fight doctor at Dr. Patty Jones. Tony, I feel like on-the-field fisticuffs are a guarantee next Saturday. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I don't like that you beat me to the fight doctor thing, so good job on you. The one thing that they are, one of the many things they're going to be telling their team, the Ohio State coaches, hey, don't get kicked out of the game. Especially don't get kicked out of the game, before you can even help us. Getting kicked out of the game does nobody any good other than the opponent, as we saw last year. Don't do something that can cost you a score, that can cost you the game. In a situation where they're talking about this particular game is a game of inches, and how that's the Georgia thing, missing out on inches of that game, how they're fighting for those inches this season. Everything they've done is preparing to win those inches. Don't give it up with something foolish. But if there is something going on, make sure it's offsetting penalties. You know what I'm saying, Tom? If you have to take a fall after throwing a punch, you do it. But just easy on the punches. There's obviously going to be some shoving and some talking. I mean, that's going to happen. This is an Ohio State team with only the redshirt seniors have experienced a Michigan win. That is crazy. That is 1980s level of failure at this point, and the 2020 season being the biggest reason for that lack of, other than the two losses in the last 2 years. But there's going to be a ton of emotion about this. You've got guys this is going to be their last regular season game, whether it's juniors, whether it's seniors, and they have not yet beaten Michigan. And they don't want to leave without doing that. And so, you know what? Maybe don't get penalized for shoving and pushing, and certainly don't throw a punch.
Well, and that's the Ohio State side of things. The Michigan side of things is Michigan's convinced that everything bad that's happened to them over the last month is all Ohio State's fault, and that they're getting hosed by the Big Ten, and that they're the victims here, and that, boy, they're going to show the world. And I think they are every bit as likely to run into emotional outburst kind of issues as Ohio State people are. And this is a game that the emotions are always turned up to 11. And so it's just, it's even turned up further than that this year because of all the stuff we just talked about. I think one of the surest bets for Saturday is there is an offsetting personal foul at some point in the first 5 minutes of the game, because I think the officials are going to be looking at the feistiness. I think the coaches and the team managers and everyone else is going to do their very best to keep everyone separated during the pregame. But someone is going to be a little too jacked up at the start of the game and hit someone out of bounds, or there's going to be pushing and shoving, or you're going to have guys grabbing each other's face masks or whatever it is. That feels like almost a given to me that you're going to have something like that, because the officials are going to want to keep that under control. Start getting guys, don't do it in a way where you're necessarily going to impact the outcome of the game, or you're not calling, you don't want to give someone 15 free yards, but you want to kind of lay down the law a little bit earlier and set the tone as the officiating crew so you don't lose control of the game. I think that is a pretty likely bet that you're going to see that relatively early in the game. And then, whichever team has more of those, the dumb penalties, the lose your mind, lose your temper kind of penalties, I think that team's going to lose. I think you also run you're likely to see, if someone gets up a couple scores late in the game, I think you might not have seen, you might see a celebration penalty or two, a taunting penalty or two. I think that's possibly coming if and when the game gets out of hand for one team or the other.
Tom, let me ask you, we know Michigan has a ton of depth. They play almost all of their guys at times. Would you perhaps send out some walk-ons to start some shenanigans? Maybe you send a walk-on to maybe challenge Marvin Harrison Jr. in the tunnel, something like that, where you will accept like the 14th guy on the NBA bench, 13th guy on the NBA bench. You send him out there to take a shot at LeBron, something like that. And if they fight each other, oh, darn, we just lost one of our players, and so did you. Any chance we see some shenanigans like that?
If Ohio State has Marvin Harrison walking around by himself at any point during the game, before the game, that would be a pretty significant failure of imagination on their part. I think you have to, pick a walk-on offensive lineman and have him walk around with Marv, and just don't let that situation arise. You fight walk-ons with walk-ons, Tony. This is it's the Chicago way.
Also, keep an eye on the cameramen on the sidelines, because we have seen we saw JT Barrett go down to a cameraman, so you never know. You got to keep your head on a swivel in Michigan Stadium.
You want to know how different life is now than it was in 2017? Ohio State won the game at Michigan in 2017, and Urban Meyer was angry in the postgame because of a camera hitting JT Barrett's knee during the pregame. What would it take for Ryan Day to be angry? Not like yelling at Lou Holtz angry, but like actually angry during a postgame if Ohio State wins this week. Like I feel like I almost can't fathom a realistic scenario in which that happens, in which the emotion he is emoting at the end of a potential win this weekend would be anything other than like the most joyful of joys.
Maybe like if he found out Jim Harbaugh toilet papered his house or something, like while the game is going on, Harbaugh is in Columbus defiling the house or something like that, something personal. And Urban Meyer certainly took that personally, the JT Barrett thing.
All right. So next one from Jason Small 36. Which battle will win the game? Ohio State defense versus Michigan offense, or Ohio State offense versus Michigan defense? And I think, Tony, I have a better sense for what the Ohio State defense is going to do against the Michigan offense. I think you're going to see Michigan score like 17 to 20 to 21 kind of points against the Ohio State defense. I think you're going to end up somewhere in that realm. And I don't think it's super likely that Ohio State's going to hold Michigan to 3 or 7. And I don't think it's super likely that Michigan's going to get to 35 either. So to me, it's the Ohio State offense versus the Michigan defense, because there's a lot more variance there. Because I think, if you have a couple turnovers, Kyle McCord has had some ball security issues this year. If Kyle McCord gets strip sacked, you add a touchdown to that, potentially add a touchdown to that number for Michigan. If you throw an interception or two, you potentially add a touchdown to that number for Michigan. You could see Ohio State scoring 10 points, or you could see, if Marvin Harrison blows up and Travion Henderson has a big game, and I think those things are both possible, I think you could see Ohio State getting into the 35 kind of range. I think if things go really well for Ohio State, a 35 to 17 kind of win, I think that's possible. I don't think that's certainly the most likely scenario. And I think if Ohio State turns the ball over a few times and the offense struggles, and this could be a 28 to 13 kind of Michigan win. That's possible as well. But I think a lot of that variance hinges on the Ohio State offense and what they do against the Michigan defense.
Yeah, and I think if you were to label an Ohio State defensive win in this game, you're talking 10 points or fewer that you're giving up to Michigan. If they do that, then yeah, I agree that the defense wins that one. And so that's why I don't see that happening. I see the Ohio State offense wins it over the Michigan defense in the scenario that we're presented with. So I would agree with you there, because we assume we know what the defense is going to do. We don't necessarily know what the offense is going to do. What we do know is the offense is going to have to do something more maybe than they've done in the past. And they have that capability, but with the strictures on the defense are so much more in terms of what that means for them to win a game. Like, do they give up 10 points and score 7 themselves? That sort of thing, where there's nothing happening offensively. Like I always go back to the 2007 Michigan game. The defense won that game. The defense has won other games in this one. Maybe the Ohio State offense has too many big time players to think that they need the defense to win it. But we have seen, I would credit the defense for winning the Notre Dame game. Obviously, they needed an offensive touchdown down the stretch there. But the Penn State game, you could credit the defense there because the offense did not look great. So maybe if this is like a 22-16 thing, a defensive win, Tom, is also forcing field goals in the red zone rather than giving up touchdowns. So we could see what the coaches want, Tom, is a complementary game from the offense, the defense, and quite possibly, even maybe, perhaps, perchance, perhaps maybe the special teams as well.
There you go. Now you've done it. We're trying to keep everyone happy with this week, and you had to bring up the Ohio State special teams. There's just no sense for what the audience wants, Tony. I'm very disappointed in you. Next one from Teach_B4U. Will the Buckeyes play or need to play 5 defensive linemen? And the answer, obviously, on a 40 snaps in the game is no. Situationally, yes. I don't know that Michigan is. I guess if we, on the last show we talked about what happens if JJ McCarthy throws 3 picks in the first quarter or something like that. What would it take to get the starting quarterback pulled? I think what you might see, if something like that happens, you might see Michigan go to the 7 offensive lineman thing and just try to grind it out. And, if you're coming from behind, that's not a great situation to try and be coming from behind with that kind of an offense. But I think you might see that. I think more than likely that's something that just comes out in maybe a short yardage or goal line kind of situation. And if that's the case, I think you probably do need to think about 5 defensive linemen for Ohio State. To me, I think the great shame in all of this is you don't have DeJuan Jones on the team. Because remember how Orlando Pace used to come in and be a defensive lineman in goal line situations or short yardage situations when he was on campus at Ohio State? I would love to see DeJuan Jones in the middle of a defensive line in a big spot against Michigan this weekend and see what that looks like. Because the interior, the Michigan tackles are not fantastic this year. They are not up to the normal standard. The interior of that offensive line is pretty darn good. I would be very interested to see, Tyleik Williams and Mike Hall or Hero Canoe or Ty Hamilton or whoever, and you throw a DeJuan Jones in there as well, just for a little extra heft, a little extra meat in there for you. It's a shame that is not going to happen.
You have kind of an idea of what DeJuan Jones would be like defensively. Just watch Kenneth Grant at Michigan at tackle, at nose tackle, and you get a pretty good idea. It is going to be interesting to see what they choose to do against the 6 offensive linemen and 3 tight ends, and how they choose to defend that. Because Jim Knowles talked about it on Tuesday. One of the difficult things with Michigan's offense is when they do have so many guys on the line of scrimmage, that creates an odd number of gaps, or just an extra number of gaps. If you're going with 6 offensive linemen, there are 7 gaps for a running back to run through. And so if there's 7 offensive linemen or 6 offensive linemen and a tight end, there's 8 gaps that they have to go through. So you've got to fill all of those gaps, and it's up to the running back to find the gap that is open in the area that the run is designed to go towards. So filling those gaps, and do you want to do it with extra defensive linemen? They're going to come up with some stuff, because I think there's a concern that you might get overwhelmed in a 4-2-5. Even if that 4-2-5, that third is Sonny Styles, I think you still have to figure out ways to get bigger against this offensive line. And yet we have seen them struggle. And maybe that leads into the next question here, but I'll be interested to see how they choose to handle the size up front of Michigan.
Yeah, and that next question you mentioned from @K Walminger, can Ohio State stop the Michigan run game and McCarthy's scrambling? And you look at Michigan's run game recently, and they have not been incredible. Last week against Maryland, 28 carries, 94 yards for Blake Corum, 3.4 yards per carry, long of 14. He scored 2 touchdowns, but they were both, right close to the goal line. Donovan Edwards, 11 carries, 39 yards, 3.5 yards per carry, long of 7. And I think a lot of Michigan's struggles have come when JJ McCarthy has not been an active part of that run game, because he only had 2 carries last week. He had, just going back through, 8 carries for 34 yards against Penn State, and they ran the ball okay there. They just it was just very methodical. It wasn't very explosive, and they weren't even particularly efficient on the ground. They just kept hitting Penn State over the head with the rock until the game ended. The week before that, 4 carries, negative 31 yards for McCarthy against Purdue. I think not having him in the run game, I probably don't need to explain this to an audience of Ohio State fans, not having the quarterback in the run game will sometimes make your run game less effective. You know this already because you have been screaming about this every year since Justin Field left campus. So, I don't know what exactly to expect from JJ McCarthy this week because he has been banged up. We all know this. This is like a known fact. Had an ankle thing. We don't know exactly what his status is. Now, he went up on the podium on Monday, smiled, said he was feeling great. Everything's wonderful. But he also said he was banged up on Saturday and, you got kind of banged up by Maryland. So, either he is a remarkably fast healer or he's probably still not 100% and you're not getting quite a straight answer, which, yeah, no kidding. You never get a straight answer this time of year from anyone on injury. So how healthy is JJ McCarthy and how mobile can JJ McCarthy be? That might be one of the great unknowns for this weekend. And that might be something that, determines, first of all, how well does Michigan run the ball, but also how effective is JJ McCarthy in avoiding pressure? Is he able to be as nimble and nifty in the pocket as he has been in the past? Because I think you're going to see some pressure off the edge from Ohio State's defensive ends. If McCarthy's able to sort of, dip and dodge and dive and all of that, that's the difference between buying a little bit of extra time and completing a pass downfield and getting a sack and getting behind the chains, and then you're off schedule, and then you can't run, and then there's more pressure on McCarthy to throw the ball, and then that makes it more predictable for you to get a pass rush. So I think, can JJ McCarthy run, and how well can JJ McCarthy run, and how frequently can JJ McCarthy run? I think that might be one of the single biggest questions for this weekend's game, and the fact that it hinges on the health of his ankle, which we don't currently know, makes that one of the biggest unresolved questions, I think.
Yeah, and he's going to do everything he can to run when needed. But if you look at their last 5 games, Tom, here's their rushing totals, which some of it doesn't sound so bad. 163 yards, 120, 110, 227, 150. This is against, now listen to these names: Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, Penn State, Maryland. Only one of those games have they averaged over 4 yards per carry, and that was Penn State when they rushed for 227 yards on 46 carries. Blake Corum had a 44-yarder. Donovan Edwards had 2 22-yarders. So 88 of their 227 yards came on 4 carries. Their other 42 carries got them about 140 yards. And we have seen them continue to, this is almost 2 months now of struggling relatively, and sometimes not relatively, just struggling, not doing very well on the ground. But defensively, they can afford to play field position, and they can be conservative. And I think as Jim Knowles said on Tuesday, it shows you how much they trust their defense when they can just run the ball every time in the second half against Penn State and not really concern themselves overly with getting too many points. They're going to try to run it 40 times, I guess, against Ohio State. It's up to Ohio State to keep them down to like 30 and under, because at that point it's not working consistently. And so I think if they, I don't know what that magic number is, but it's probably somewhere in the low to mid 30s. If they keep them under 30, then that tells me Ohio State is stopping the run really well and maybe forcing the pass more. I don't know if you have to get them out of the run early, or not that you can get them out of the run early, because that's just what they do. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they decide to force something in terms of what are they trying to force? Are they trying to force the run? Are they trying to force the pass? Are they trying to force JJ McCarthy to keep it on a read and that'll tell you what they're kind of looking for or what they're wanting Michigan's offense to do. And it's going to be fun to watch, just the year-long want and desire from the Ohio State defense to fix something that they got so wrong last year. And then a Michigan offense that could be like, well, you tried that, it didn't work. You've tried this and it didn't work. And the response that Michigan can provide, that doesn't matter what you want to try to do, we're just going to continue to put the ball down the field however we choose to, because we are Michigan. And that's what they're going to go into that's what they're going into the game with, the mindset of, we are Michigan. Nothing else matters. Doesn't matter that you're Ohio State. We're going to do what we do. And if it means running the ball 45 times for 150 yards against Maryland, or like they did against Maryland, that is the kind of ball control that Ohio State can't afford.
Well, what's interesting about Michigan's offense, you mentioned, holding Michigan to 30 runs or less would be a really good thing. You know how many teams have done that against Michigan this year? Had
0.
Michigan run the ball? 0 times. Michigan ran the ball 31 times against East Carolina, and that was one where they threw the ball 31 times, that is not going to be a winning formula for Michigan if the number of runs and passes is equivalent. That is probably not a good sign for Michigan on Saturday. And then the other one was the Bowling Green game, where they had 3 turnovers. They only ran 44 offensive plays in that game. That was just kind of a weird game because you had 3 turnovers and Bowling Green was trying to keep the ball away from Michigan. So that was a little bit of a weird one as well. When you look at some of their more recent games, the games where they've run the ball for just, only 34 times, they did that against both Michigan State and Purdue. Those are both games where they were relatively effective through the air, thrown for basically 10 yards per an attempt against Michigan State. Just under 10 yards per attempt against Purdue. I don't think they're going to be able to throw for 10 yards per attempt on anything close to 35 or 37 pass attempts. So, if Michigan is throwing the ball as much as they are running the ball, that is probably not a very good thing for their likelihood of winning the game on Saturday.
One last thing, Tom. And I just looked. Do you know the last team to hold Michigan under 30 rushes in a game?
Was it Ohio State in 2019?
It was Georgia in the playoffs in 2021.
What did Michigan's offensive linemen wear on their shirts walking into the stadium that game? Do you remember?
Was it Michigan versus everybody? I have no idea.
No, it was not. It was, and I quote, "Run the damn ball."
Oh, well.
Life is full of choices, Tony. Next one from @TJ and G. Another catch where Marv's toe appeared to tap that was overruled by the booth. Over under one of these bad calls versus Michigan on Saturday. And this is one where I did not have a great view of this live. He caught the ball. This was against Minnesota. Marv caught the ball like going out of bounds. And I guess they ruled it was a call stands thing. The officials huddled on the sideline for quite a while, and then finally decided, no, we don't think he got his feet down. But then there was some view that I saw Marv retweet where it appeared that he had not one but 2 different feet worth of toes down with the ball in his hands. It feels like he's maybe just superhuman enough that people go, nah, come on. Like, no, the officials in the field are like, come on, no, that's not. It feels like he might be a victim of his own success.
That picture that he tweeted out, that somebody tweeted out and he retweeted, I mean, it's a still frame. So you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on with the ball per se, like if it's still moving, but you do see his toes look like they're touching the ground. What the problem was is they don't kick up any of the rubber pellets. And that's because I'm guessing his toes were just on the blades of grass, not down 1 inch into the rubber pellets there. But it is interesting because, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times this year and last year, he'll make a catch and in the press box we're like, nope, no way. And this time I was like, you know what? That's not a catch, but let's see, because Marv always proves us wrong. And then you're watching it, you're like, oh boy, I don't know. And then they're talking about it. At this point, the ref should just be like, you know what? This is Marvin Harrison. So it's not even a benefit of the doubt. He would know better than we would at this point if he caught the ball. And yeah, the dude is incredible. And if to tell him that he hasn't caught something that doesn't hit the ground, I'm not going to tell him he didn't catch it.
He's gotten the wrong, not the wrong end, but the not the winning end of several replays and close calls this year, where his stats could be even better with. There was the one that was rolled out of the illegal touching thing against Indiana. The Big Ten later said was not right. I think there was a couple where the ball's like maybe moving just a little bit on replay on what otherwise would have been a catch. So yeah, how much better could his stats be if some of those close calls had gone his way? Last one from @NickJ23. Tony, this is very random, but I'd be curious to know your top/bottom 5 Big Ten stadiums / game day atmospheres, because it's something I'd like your feedback on. Thank you, and go Blue.
Tom, I'm interested to see what Michigan is like on Saturday. Now, we don't necessarily get to mingle with the Michigan crowds because we kind of enter the stadium from behind the scenes. Now, can't tell you where. It's a very secret location. But we get to walk through Penn State's tailgating and experience that stadium. I think that is a top 5. Nebraska's was top 5. I think we even talked during the walking to and going around the Wisconsin thing, like this needs to be up on the list now. That was a fantastic environment. That's a awesome campus. Everything about it is just go check it out. You'll enjoy it. The campus. Nebraska, did I mention Nebraska? Nebraska is fun. That's a cool place. Is there any Iowa is legit. I mean, it's a long way away from everything, but those are some of the places. I can't wait to see the new Northwestern Stadium in a few years and see what that's like. But number one for me is I really, really like Nebraska, and I really, really like Wisconsin. I was going to say, obviously, Penn State is the most difficult place to play, so it's the craziest environment at night for a whiteout. But I don't know. What do you got?
Well, in terms of my favorite road trips, it's Nebraska and Wisconsin, probably in that order. Iowa's probably third. Penn State. In terms of atmospheres, I feel like we kind of have to caveat this with the high-end atmosphere. We always get the high-end atmosphere when we are at games because it is an Ohio State game when we're there. So it's always, you hear so-and-so is everyone's Super Bowl. Well, in the Big Ten, Ohio State is everyone's Super Bowl. So when Ohio State goes to Penn State, frequently we're there for either, the big noon kickoff, massively hyped game, or very frequently we're there for the whiteout. And that's been, the only time the whiteout has failed to impress me was in 2020 when there was no one in the stadium. Other than that, that is consistently probably the best atmosphere we're at. We're leaving Ohio State games off of this. We're talking about road games here. I think Ohio State, a big game at Ohio State is, would be very, very high on this list. Every time we go to Michigan, it's an Michigan-Ohio State game. So, every time Michigan comes to Ohio State, it's the best atmosphere of those 2 years. So I would certainly assume that anytime we go to Michigan, that's the best atmosphere of those 2 years. And, that Michigan is certainly up there. Wisconsin, when Wisconsin is good or Wisconsin is winning, that might be second behind Penn State. It has been 20 years since I've been to Wisconsin for a game that Wisconsin won, but I just remember that being a raucous atmosphere. Michigan is up there, but, we're grading the Michigan-Ohio State game, which doesn't feel like a fair, a fair basis to judge this on because no one else gets to play a Michigan-Ohio State game at home. So that's not really fair to everyone else.
And I will say up in the press box, a lot of this is muted because you're enclosed. The windows aren't necessarily open. I will say the only stadium that shakes, the only press box that shakes is at Wisconsin. Everything else is pretty much standstill. And that place is just different. And it's built to be different, although the building predates the jump around. Just throw that out there. So that will do it for us here. Of course, thank you for tuning in. Got many more Michigan-centric shows coming here. I still got some days to come before the game finally gets here, so we'll get you through it via podcasts and videos and things like that. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe to us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member there. check us out on the message board and the content behind the paywall there as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.